Hey Fit Pros, it's your host Tyler Valencia here. I quickly want to share a free resource we have on the KIPS website and YouTube channel. If you're struggling with your online workouts or just want to see the items that we recommend, check out our virtual training resources page. You'll find breakdowns on streaming setups, reviews on microphones, and other free videos that can help you build your fitness business today. Did I mention they're free? Go check them out at the link in the description or head over to our website to find them under the blog tab. How's it going, listeners? Before we get to this episode with Brooke Johnson, I want to make sure that we give a shout out to all the cities, locations that have been tuning into the podcast to kick off 2022. We've been seeing some great analytics from across the globe, and I want to make sure that you know that we appreciate you tuning in, listening, and continuing to listen. So Black Hawk, Rapid City, Canberra, Nottingham, Ashburn, Albuquerque, St. Petersburg, Vancouver, Kingsport, and Dubai. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a fan of the KIPS podcast. Now let's get to the episode with Brooke Johnson. Welcome to the KIPS podcast. My name is Tyler Valencia, and I'm the president of KIPS and Time to Train Fitness. We got a topic that I'm sure a lot of listeners are looking at the title. They tuned in because they probably went through some of these realizations, these issues, these barriers in their way with online workouts. So we have returning guest, Brooke Johnson on the podcast. Brooke, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be back here again.
Yes. For the listeners and anybody that's tuning in for the first time, can you give a breakdown of your background in the fitness industry?
Yeah, Tyler. So I've been in the fitness industry for about 10 years. I'm not one of the younger ones that came in starting fresh out of like high school or college and working my way through that way. Mm-hmm. I actually went a little bit reverse though. So I got married, have kids, and then when my children got a little bit older, then I decided to really get into my passion. And I quit my 9-to-5 job and just started adventuring into into the fitness industry. And with that, you learn a lot. I started with cycling, did some group fitness as well. And then now I also have personal training as well. Now, starting back, I was just like everyone else, mostly was just doing in-person training and in-person fitness until COVID when everything shut down. So with everyone else, everything was at home. So at this point, it was, do I want to continue reaching out and helping people meet those goals and continue growing with my business? Or am I going to sit in the sidelines and let everyone else steamroll ahead? Mm-hmm. So I took the plunge, and I didn't know very much, but I got into the virtual world and haven't looked back since.
I love it. That is true. You haven't looked back yet. And there are parts that I feel like I have to give for the listener so that they know the background of how this podcast episode came together and even my connection to Brooke. Brooke works for the company that I own, Time to Train Fitness, where we do online workouts. I'm not trying to do a promo right now for it, but she's one of our instructors, great instructors, that she just had the 1-year anniversary of teaching for Time to Train Fitness, and almost exactly what Brooke said in terms of how she wanted to overcome things. That is literally why I wanted to have her back on the podcast. She's somebody that when barriers are in her way, she wants to tackle them, get past them. And with online workouts, there are a lot of things that instructors don't know that they're going to come up. They don't know how they're going to get past them because these are not things that we learned about in a manual and in certification. There are more resources coming out online, and not another plug there for KIPS and what we do with our online tutorials, but there is a learning curve. And Brooke and I started having a great conversation about the learning curve of online workouts and all that's a part of it. Brooke, what do you think is part of the learning curve for doing online workouts?
From the perspective of teaching online versus in person, they're completely different. You are starting completely over a little bit. You still have your knowledge of how to instruct a class, but you're in a completely different environment. So you are really kind of starting over. You have to put on the learning hat and trial and error, what works, what doesn't work. And that is kind of how you grow. I was talking to you actually yesterday about finding, your strength in the struggle. And I think that is what makes or breaks success in the online business, because it's not easy. It's not something that you can just easily transition to taking it virtually and without any hiccups. Because I can tell you there is a lot of hiccups.
That's true. That's true. The mentality and the approach to it, I think, is such an important thing. That just what you were talking about right there, with understanding that you have to learn these items. And I think that instructors think that they can go from apples to apples with it, teaching in person, and then just flipping on the camera. Yeah, this is going to work. People are going to tune in for it. And all of a sudden they have their first hiccup, or they realize, oh man, this is a lot harder than in person. I'm going to go back to in person. And I think one of the things that you and I have talked about a lot over the last few months has been it's not for everybody. And that's, I think, one of those harsh things is it's not for everybody. But of course, if you want to get into it, you can, and you can learn through it with those things. When you first started doing online workouts, what were some of those things that you learned, or that you feel like, oh, wow, like after a few months, this became much easier because I wanted to learn more about it, and I feel like this is something that's going to help me along my journey? What were some of those things?
I think one of the things is you just have to just start.
Yeah.
A lot of times we get a little messed up in the details and thinking of perfect timing, perfect equipment, perfect background, and you are selling yourself. You are the product. And the other things are kind of just nice additions, but not necessary. Yeah. So yes, there is some things you do need, like, audio and a camera, things like that. Well, I use my iPhone, but one of the most important things is to work on your framing. Yeah. And also doing that sound check. I can tell you how frustrating it is to finish, because most times, like with workouts, for me anyways, I do them all in one take from start to finish. You don't want to cut and edit and try to do all that. It would just take forever. So you kind of want to do it when you start, you go through it, and then when you see the finished product at the end, you just have to go with it, because you can nitpick it to death. Or the worst case scenario is if you did not turn your microphone on, or you had your volumes not right. So one of the key things that I always tell anyone that's branching into this business, to make sure you do that sound check and do your sound check at different levels of your voice, because when you're teaching everything, you're talking high and then you're talking low, you're on the ground, whatever. So make sure that those levels are key, because there is nothing worse than finishing it and you're so excited for this your product, and you can't hear yourself, or the microphone is muffled or not on at all. It's frustrating, and you only do that once and then you won't do it again.
Yeah. Something that popped in my mind that would be a good segment here is that transition to different formats. Right now with Time to Train Fitness, you are doing more strength training workouts, and you traditionally have done more cycling stuff. What has that, in terms of the setup and that type of learning curve, been for you, going from cycling to strength training?
One of the biggest realizations, which I didn't think about, was how small my frame was. So when you're figuring out your online workouts, the space that you have is a lot smaller than what you would think it would be. When you watch, other people on YouTube or on other platforms, things like that, you would think that they have so much space, but honestly, it's very tiny. So you have to really think about your movement and your body when you're in there, because there's, again, same thing with one take. There would be terrible if you spent, 45 minutes on a class and your arms cut off the whole time. So, those are things that, that's a big realization, that movement with doing online, any other genre besides, cycling, we say stationary, is making sure that, you have that, you're framing right, that you are in the center, and that you talk clearly, loudly, and explain as you're going through your workouts, what movements that you're doing, and not having that dead space and talking to your viewers and trying to make that connection and showing off your personality.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. The one tip that I will throw in for listeners that I see a lot of that we work on, usually at the beginning of if an instructor is going online, that it's that balance, the evenness in the bottom of the frame. So the best way I can describe it for the listeners tuning in is that your bottom of the frame, that distance between the bottom of the frame and the wall, if that is uneven, that's something that's going to catch somebody's eye potentially. It catches my eye every time, and it's just oftentimes it's shifting your camera side to side, so left and right, or it's your tripod. You're trying to figure those things out, and you start to realize, how Brooke said, that there's not much space in there. But the thing that I always say that is very true is that people don't know what's on the left, the right, or behind the camera. They don't know. So finding a space, identifying that space. I know people that do it in their master bedroom. They do it in a basement. Like Brooke, I believe it's in a basement.
Yes.
Sometimes it's in an office. Finding a space that 12 feet maybe that you have, but then using your camera to see what's in frame, all these pieces will come together and you'll start to realize, okay, this is my frame and here's the space that I have to work with. Along the same line with your filming space, Brooke, which is transformed over the last year, what have you felt like adding a piece in, changing a color? What has that process been like for you?
Basically how I set it up. I mean, I've been with Time to Train for just over a year now. Mm-hmm. And if you would look at the videos, how I started back in February to this February, it's definitely changed a lot of my growth in the studio. My perception was that, by the end of the month, whatever I made from Time to Train, I would cut out a little bit for mm-hmm. my savings and put back into my business, into the studio, because that way I could save up and I wasn't feeling as if I was, really extending myself too much, and then just putting it back in. So little by little, adding a little bit more, a little bit, better, more pleasing to the eye, catching mm-hmm. for viewers, things like that. I started off with just very basic. I had my bike and I had a ring light and I had a white wall, and, that mm-hmm. was it. So, mm-hmm. and that is a good, it shouldn't deter someone from starting, because again, you are the product. They're coming to watch you. That is what viewers want. They want that personality. They want a connection, and that's what you're giving someone. So mm-hmm. if anything, try to make it as free from distractions as possible. You mm-hmm. don't want to be like messing with a mic or fumbling with the music, things like that. You want to look as professional as possible, mm-hmm. With free of distractions. But then again, when I say as professional as possible, not saying that you're going to be perfect, because there's little oops or little mess ups, little hiccups, nothing crazy. But like if you miss cue, or you say, move your right arm and you're talking about your left leg, like things like that are, nothing to like stop the production of the show. Mm-hmm. But if you are constantly if you're fumbling with your microphone, it keeps messing around on your head and you keep touching it, things like that are breaking that connection. Mm-hmm. So I think, those tiny things are what is going to draw people in and keep people listening, keep people interacting with you. So that's how I kind of started with it. And then from there, I upgraded my microphone, which I wish I would have done the first thing, because I was guilty. Again, it's like learning and, things like that. I was fumbling with my mic a lot because mm-hmm. it kept sliding on my head. I think, if anything, invest in the microphone, because that audio quality will be so much better. And you will look back and why didn't I just do that? Mm-hmm. That's probably the best, one of the number one things that you should do. From there, I did upgrade. I got some shadow boxes just to help with lighting, because again, another great thing if you're thinking about with the online workout is you want to be able to control your light. So being free of any kind of windows or being, near doors, things like that, anything that you can control. So where I am now, I have every blind light pulled and blacked out so that I can control where I want this light to go. So that's why I had the addition of the shadow boxes, and I have one low and one high. That way it illuminates me where I am, so that I'm the center focus and that can help get that professional edge, on the online workouts.
I feel like you're in my head, Brooke, that you know everything that I would tell somebody with the microphone, because I can guarantee somebody listening in with the microphone and investing in one that's, you're looking at the cost of it, you're like 150, 200. Oh my goodness, I can't buy that. And what often I've seen is that instructors will buy the one that's a headset, and it's around $30 on Amazon, and probably somebody listening to this and like, yep, I have that one right now. And the issues that I have with it, and I will say that, can it work? Yeah, it can work with a mixer and interface with the appropriate adapter. Yeah, it gets the job done. The sound quality, though, that's one of the biggest things that I will tell you is a big difference with it. If you're paying $30 for something, you're going to get $30 worth of sound on it. And audio is one of those things where people will tune in more for it. If it sounds good, they can hear you clearly. There's nothing that's distracting them with the sound. They're going to stay tuned in for it. So if you do, or when you do buy a more expensive microphone, that's going to be the first thing you're going to hear. Like, wow, that sounds so clear. That sounds so good. Because that one that's a headset too, it's the proximity of it. It's right next to your mouth. So if you're doing cycling or you're doing a HIIT workout, they're going to hear that breathing. They're going to hear that constant breathing, or you're going to be trying to alter your breathing, which is something you don't want, which may become a distraction. The proximity of that, it's right in front of your face. So those are things that you don't really think about with the microphone, that are realities of the online workout or streaming a workout. Is the microphone is going to be such a huge improvement. The next thing, though, that I kind of want to go into, that I think we had a really interesting talk about, it was the work-life balance. With Time to Train, you make an honest and a very positive approach to reaching out to new instructors that come on board to talk to them about work-life balance, but also these realizations of teaching online. First, what was kind of your mindset with it, and what are some of the things that you share with them?
When I first started, I was kind of, I was new. I had no idea what I was doing. I bounced off a lot of my ideas to Tyler, and as well as my husband, who, again, he has no idea about, online training or any of this. We're just both of us like trying to figure out where should we film, camera angle, how do I adjust my bike, all those hiccups that come up. And so my approach, now that I feel like I've been in this for, going on a year here, that I can at least share some little tidbits of, what worked for me to help someone else. And I think that's important, especially when you're growing a community, when with Time to Train, we are all instructors together. And if there's anything that I can help with somebody that would, alleviate some stress, I'm going to try to share that with them. And especially with the work and the life balance, when you have the opportunity, which is amazing, to be able to stay at home and do what you love, you have to find that balance, though, because biting off more than you can chew, especially at the beginning, it will leave you just feeling overwhelmed, burnout, stressed. And with anything that starts with new, you're not going to start out perfect. We're going to start out with, issues that brought up of, what we've discussed earlier, microphone issues, framing issues. I've had, when I first started filming, like my dog would run into the screen, or the children, weren't knowing that, like mom's filming right now. We're not supposed to be down here in the basement. And they would be like falling down the steps, like things like that, and just trying to tell, the new instructors, like, take it at a good pace, even though you have the availability to, record as much as you can. Set a schedule for yourself and keep with it. Even when you feel like, I could tape 5 workouts every day now because I have the availability to do it at my house, you're going to find yourself not giving 100% every time, because you're going to be burnt out. You're going to feel overwhelmed. And that is not the end goal. The end goal is to be able to do this sustainably, and not like all in one type deal. So that's kind of one of the things I always try to reach out and tell the new instructors about. Also, one of the bigger things is that even though it's a 45-minute workout or whatever, how long your workout is, you might as well double that for the beginning, for your sound check, for setting up your room if you have to move things around, organizing your playlist, writing, your cues, some things, helpful tips throughout your workout. Because when you get into the online world, you can't really feed off the room. You can't feed off the riders. You can't feed off, the members that you're working with. So you have to create that within yourself. So that is something that you have to learn to do. And for when I first started out, I would think about like when I'm riding in a studio and then thinking about that energy and some of the cues that I give riders. And then I would write that down on paper, because when we're teaching online, sometimes you forget about, to make it personal and to find, who are you talking to right now? Like you don't want to pretend like you're talking to a camera, because it seems so disingenuous, and that's not what you want. You want them to feel like they are riding with you and that you are talking to them and that you have this connection. So that was one of the bigger things that I told them. And also that you're going to probably have a few workouts that you're not going to be able to use because of those little hiccups that come in through the filming process. And you have to do those once. And I told one of our new instructors, Kelly, I told her about, forgetting to hit record. And she, within a month, I think, after, she's like, I wanted to text you because I told you it happened. And there's no one who will understand that feeling and that pain, but, and I was like, well, it's going to happen. And now you'll never do it again. Like, you'll double check, even when you're, you think, you'll look at it again to make sure that you had hit that record, because there is nothing, the worst feeling, and there's nothing you can do about it. So.
Yeah. I think the best way to summarize that is with the process, the protocol, having your check, going through each single one of them, and then making sure you repeat it each time, because you never know. And I don't want to jinx somebody that's listening on this, but it could be that one time that you don't check your microphone, making sure it's turned on, or you don't check that you put phantom power to it, or whatever that might be, that it doesn't work. And you're like, oh, I went through all the other steps and I just didn't do that one time and I messed up. It happens. And so getting your system, your mental checklist down and just doing it every single time. If you need to write it down. And all of a sudden that process becomes faster and faster and faster. And all of a sudden you just feel more comfortable with it. It's part of the process of getting more comfortable with that end of it. The lights, the camera, the interface or mixer, the microphone, getting more comfortable with it, understanding how it all works together. Of course, at the beginning, there's going to be that learning curve that you're like, I think this one goes here. Did that work? But all of a sudden, you get better at it. And then all of a sudden, your setup is just boom, boom, boom. And you're ready to rock and roll with it. And you're moving on to the next step. I feel like that's the big key is there. You're moving on to the next step of growing as an online instructor. It's learning more about that connection with the camera, learning more about how you can make it look more professional. All these things start to come into play, but you got to start. That's that thing that Brooke said that I'm saying now with you got to start that process. And that's often what I tell instructors too. We just got to get you going so we can learn about where you are and where we can start to make those improvements with your online workouts. So I
agree. Especially with that you said the connection with the camera. I think that was definitely another learning curve. And I'm not a type of person that I would get on Instagram and just, talk to the camera all day. And that's not really how I am. I'm more of an introvert. So that was definitely had to push myself. Like, it's a lot different teaching in front of, I could teach in front of 50 people in a class, but talking by myself in front of a camera it's very intimidating. And one of the biggest things I always tell the new instructors is to make sure that you're looking at that camera, and you're looking at the camera pretending like it's somebody that you're talking to, and keeping that eye contact, because that's important to get that, again, the connection with the viewers. A good idea is always also having like a whiteboard, and that's where I put my my playlists, like label if you were doing strength training, like kind of like how my circuits are going, things like that. That way you're not looking down on a paper, you're not looking down on the floor, that you're keeping your eyes up. And that even if you're not looking directly at the camera, you don't look like you're, I always kind of put the whiteboard kind of beside where the camera is. That way it looks like I'm looking at the camera, but I'm actually like glancing up at my notes.
That's exactly the process that I go through as well. I have a sheet of paper that I tape right below the camera, because in reality, people don't know. People don't know what's behind the camera. I know I keep saying that in terms of stuff in your room, or maybe it's a bedroom or a basement. People don't know what's behind the camera. That includes your setup and your notes for yourself. So you can pack as many notes as you need. And I highly recommend doing it, because when the camera's rolling, the lights are on, and all of a sudden you forgot what the next exercise is, you're 15 minutes and you're like, and you're trying to remember. That's not what you want. So pack those notes in there and make it easier on yourself. Make it easier on yourself with the preparation, all those kinds of things. And a little pro tip that I'll throw in that I've been using a lot over the last few weeks that's been great is that I have the luxury of having another tripod. And so I actually put a tripod at the same height as my camera, and then I also put my timer there. If I'm doing a certain type of maybe strength training or core workout or Tabata workout, is I'll put the timer right next to it so that I can see all those things that are near the camera. My notes, my stopwatch, my timer, all those things are right next to the camera, and I'm looking in one spot. There's only one thing that's not next to the camera, which is the playback monitor, but those are all in one spot, exactly in line with what Brooke said. Get those things in there, make it easier on yourself, and make sure that once you roll, you're doing it one time. So we've talked about a lot of things so far in the podcast about online workouts, microphones, growing with just starting off. Are there any other harsh realizations that you would call them that instructors have to kind of get over when they're teaching online?
I think the comparison is definitely something that has to be, you have to get over that. We were talking about earlier that I'm branching into the strength training, and I've taught strength training in person in the past. I'm also a current online personal trainer. And when I decided to get into teaching this virtually, just a, full body strength workout, I, of course, went and looked at other people, what they're doing, ways that they set up their class, how they, transition from, exercise to exercise. And it kind of, it really hurts, it makes you feel inadequate. It makes you feel like you're not ready for it. And then I kind of put in perspective that my beginning and my step one isn't anything like those people, because they're on step, they're on the 5th flight, or they're on, step number 157. So I can't compare myself from where I am now to something that, those people have been doing this for years. So I need to keep that in perspective, because comparison is what's going to just tear you down and feel like you just can't do it. So that is a definitely a harsh realization that I never really thought I was the type of person that, I always feel like I was kind of confident in what I do. But when you start looking at everyone else, it does start to feel like, oh, well, this person, she's so confident and she has 6-pack abs, and, she can do a push-up with one arm, and, all these kind of things. And you have to put that in perspective. Like there's a niche for everyone. And it's not just the millennials that are looking into the online world. There's a baby boomers now that, are still not 100% comfortable going back into, a brick and mortar gym, and they're venturing into this online world. So for those that have that niche, this is a perfect opportunity to find, your niche, and to get out there and show, that there's a space for everyone.
Yeah.
Another harsh realization would be just being comfortable in front of the camera. We did kind of discuss this earlier, being in front of the camera and looking at those body angles, and you'll look at yourself and you'll realize that you shouldn't be like head on. You should be more at a diagonal when you're doing this exercise. And you'll realize that, you can't just go in as you taught in person and just fluidly go into the virtual option and just do the same workout, because you have to think about your angles. You have to think about your framing. You have to think about those little different things that can make that the viewer can see where you're at. Because when you're on a screen, you're missing out on that. They'll be able to move their head to look around to the other side of you to see like what you're doing here. So you have to really explain what you're doing a lot more. You have to be more into cueing and talking more than you would with the on person. So that's definitely, that pushes you. It definitely pushes you to level up. It's a realization that you have to really work on yourself and the current instructor that you are to get those connections with the viewers.
Yeah. At the moment that we're recording this, I would say like I'm more into like microphones right now, and I'm researching those things. Like that's what I'm really all about learning more about. Or is there anything right now that you are growing or that you're learning about right now with online workouts?
As we talked about, I'm starting the String 45 classes, and that has definitely been a learning curve for me. I've been taping exclusively just cycle 45 and cycle 35 plus workouts. So it's a lot easier because I don't move. So I'm right there whenever I set my frames. I get on the bike, I can teach my workout, and I've been teaching cycling classes for almost 10 years. So it's definitely, I've got a lot more comfortable, in that stage. So moving over to, the free weights and resistance bands and using your space, walking, moving in with into the camera and back away from the camera and keeping the viewers. It's definitely more of a learning curve and something that's challenged me. And I feel like in the long run will make me a better, well-rounded instructor. It's cool. It's a cool process.
Yeah, agreed. With now going back to mindset and even the approach that you are in with the beginning, I think that this is one of the topics before we start to close this podcast episode out that I want to make sure that we touch on is with the things that you were struggling with at the beginning. I know we talked about the audio stuff, but the mental side of it too, that even though people that are very motivated, like yourself, highly motivated, want to learn through it. Of course, we have those things that are struggles. And through those struggles, we learn more and we push ourselves. We see how much we can push ourselves mentally, physically. Those are things that we love to hear. And for you, Brooke, what were some of those things that you feel like outside of the workouts that you felt yourself harping on or that you were venting about with maybe your husband, things like that? What were some of those? What was that mental process like?
My husband, who is so supportive when I decided to get into the online, has been my therapist and just kind of my listening board. He works full time, and so he doesn't have the ability to help me set up my film space and set up my framing and things like that. So it can get frustrating because when I do this all by myself, I record myself, do my sound check, play back and look, and then adjust and then do it again. So there's been a few times being able to finagle him to come down and help me so I can do this all I can stand there and he can just do the framing for me, which is, a definite help. But, for most of us, we have to do this on our own. And, honestly, you probably should do it on your own because you don't want to have to feel like you are at the mercy of someone else's schedule, especially when you've set your own schedule for virtual, because it can be very frustrating to move, frame, record, play back, don't like it, got to do it again, and then you can just get really nitpicky about it. It definitely can get a little overwhelming. So, some of those frustrations, I just have to be like, this is okay. I'm not I'm in my frame. I have my workout planned. I just need to go for it. I feel like sometimes I procrastinate because I want that perfection, and we have to let go a little bit of that.
Agree a lot with that. And it's one of those things that could potentially push someone to, just throwing this out there. I know that it's not for everybody with editing, but editing can fix. The way that I say it and I approach it is that when you are filming something, of course you want the best possible. It used to be a mindset, in my opinion. I heard about it, we can just fix that in post-production. No biggie. We'll just do X, Y, Z. We'll make it look okay. But the better you can make something look is only to make it easier, and more improvements can come on it in post-production. In my opinion, that's the approach that you should have with it. And we are fortunate enough as a company that we can edit stuff and we can fix lighting, we can color correct stuff, we can fix framing, we can zoom in on things, we can fix audio, all those kinds of things that hopefully take the stress off an instructor. That's the best way to put it. With instructors that work with us, we have the ability to do these things, and once an instructor does realize, I can be a little bit more lax on my audio, not stress as much on it with my levels, because in post-production all these things are going to be fixed, and so it's just working on and putting your focus in other areas. So that might be something to think about if you're listening on the podcast, just doing very minimal editing on it and just putting your attention somewhere else. Brooke, as we get now to the podcast takeaways, and I switched them up this time for this episode because we're talking all about online workouts and diving into your insight on things. So we took the normal question, or I took the normal question and I flipped it a little bit, that what are 3 myths about teaching online workouts?
One of the most important thing that I've seen a lot of when I've talked to people about that I am an online instructor is that you cannot get the same workouts online that you can as in a gym. And I find that a complete myth. I sweat and, work just as hard as when I'm online that I do if I was in a brick and mortar gym. So I feel like you can still get that same workout. You can still use, those muscles and, get that cardio in from anywhere. I think it just depends on that connection with the coach, that connection with the instructor, and to make your workout fun and adaptable and modified if it needs to be. And, that's what keeps people coming back. And it's definitely here to stay. I'm not saying that, brick and mortar is going to be obsolete. I think definitely the hybrid, and for everyone that they have options. And I think that is one of the best things that came out of, the COVID and everything locked down, was that, we can still work out and we can still grow and get stronger wherever we are. So now, we have options for people that connect, with your online workouts while they're on vacation, or while they are, home with a sick child that they can no longer, make their gym class. So it's never too late to start. You may think that, everything's opening back up, online's, drifting out. And I don't think I feel it's another myth as well. I feel as if, online's here to stay. I think that there is plenty of opportunities for whatever your niche is. I think that's one of the first things that you should, find, when you're branching into online, like, you are your product and who are your target audience and what is your niche, and then grow from there. And you may have multiple target audiences, but keep it small, start small. Think of, what's your favorite, genre of workout, and then just go with it. And then once you get comfortable, go a little deeper. But the best thing is just to get started. I think that another myth, which we talked about earlier, would be about only millennials are either the online instructors or the ones that are online participants. And I definitely feel that that's, again, because of, the past couple of years. I think that everyone's coming into that digital age, even the ones that were resistant and the baby boomers have definitely branched out. And they're looking for you, and they're looking for what you bring to the table. So there's a target audience for everyone. There's, people out there looking for that person, and you can fill that for them, which is pretty special.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All good ones there. I think that the last one is something that I've probably thought about a little bit over the last few months. We're talking to different instructors, and some saying how, the online stuff is kind of dying, or a lot of people just went back. And I think that now is a great time, if you're willing to put those steps in. If you're an instructor listening to this and you're willing to put those steps in to build the business part of it too, that you can. I think that it opens up a lot of doors for people to have a bigger opportunity to teach people globally, because you're not just in your local market now, but it's another offering. I know a good amount of trainers that train people that they were maybe working with before, and now they move states, whoever moved states, and all of a sudden they're now able to reconnect with them, or even training your family that lives in a different state. All these different doors start to open up, and that's through online. You just have to learn the nuances of it. You have to go through all the business steps of it, and there are a lot of tools out there for you. It's not like it's as if maybe, looking back now, 10 years ago, when you had to put a lot of these pieces together yourself, or even just platforms that were available for instructors, or maybe just 1 to 3, maybe. There are so many more options out there that grew over the last 2 years. So definitely something to think about. Brooke, before we sign off here, can you give the listeners your social media links and all that kind of good stuff?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Tyler. It was great talking to you. And I would love to connect with other online potential fitness instructors, or someone who's in the game. I love to connect with other people. We can bounce ideas off of everyone, or help troubleshoot. It's definitely a awesome environment to be in the virtual world. But it also can be a bit overwhelming. So definitely, I have my Instagram, Mrs. B Johnson. And then also I'm on Facebook, Brooke Johnson. So you can connect with me, and I would try to help out as much as I can.
Great stuff in this podcast. A lot of stuff for instructors that are maybe in the thick of it already, or those just looking to get started. Some things to think about. And if you're listening and you want to throw some comments in on your favorite platform, let us know. Shoot a comment, and we'll see if we can address it and potentially help out with it. Thank you for being my guest, Brooke, and as always, being a great instructor.
Thanks for having me. It's been great talking with you.